The room was filled with whispers. A bankrupt millionaire, someone who had lost everything, was doing the unthinkable. People were shocked, confused, and a little bit disgusted when they found out that he had adopted a homeless girl. The world couldn't comprehend it. Why would someone who had just lost his empire and fortune, someone who had worked his entire life to build wealth, suddenly take in a girl from the streets with nothing to offer? The criticism was instant, cutting deep. "He's lost his mind," they said. "What does he think he's doing? This is a desperate act, not a wise one." The eyes of the world were on him, and they were all filled with judgment. But they didn't know the full story. They didn't know that behind that decision was a man who had been broken, shattered by the weight of his own failures. They didn't know that, in a strange twist of fate, the girl was the very key to his redemption, a redemption he hadn't known he needed until that very moment. He was running on fumes, on the last remnants of hope, and what he saw in her was the very spark of life he thought he had lost forever. As for her, the girl had no idea what was happening. She was cold, alone, lost in the world, with nothing but the hope of surviving the next day. She had no family, no home, and no future to look forward to. Her life was a never-ending cycle of hunger and pain. But then, there he was, a stranger who saw something in her, something beyond the grime of the street and the walls she had built around herself to survive. He looked at her with eyes that weren't filled with pity, but with something deeper. Was it empathy? Compassion? Or was it something more, a reflection of his own lost soul, trying to find a way back from the brink of ruin? But what the world didn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that this was no ordinary adoption. The story that was unfolding wasn't just about a girl finding a home. It was about the rebirth of a man who had lost everything, who would soon realize that in helping her, he would help himself in ways he could never have imagined. The girl was no older than 14, with dirty clothes that hung loosely from her fragile frame. Her face was pale, marked with the exhaustion and harshness of the streets, yet there was a purity to her expression, an innocence that had been shattered by a world that had never been kind. Her wide eyes, full of fear and confusion, constantly darted around, always looking for the next threat or danger. But there was something else in her gaze, something softer, a flicker of hope that refused to be extinguished, no matter how many times life had knocked her down. The world had made her hard, but inside there was a girl who still longed for warmth, for kindness, for the simple things most people took for granted. She was homeless, alone, abandoned by society. She had been living on the streets for months, struggling to survive each day. She had no family, no friends. Every corner she turned, she faced the cold indifference of the world. People ignored her, dismissed her, or looked at her with judgment. She had become invisible in a way that made her feel smaller with each passing day. Yet despite the harshness of her reality, there was still a spark of innocence within her. It was a kind of purity that made her believe, even if just for a moment, that things could be different, that there might still be good people in the world. Her hands trembled as she clutched the bag of stale bread she had found in a dumpster. It was barely enough to keep her going, but it was all she had. Her stomach ached with hunger, but there was no time to think about that. She had to keep moving, keep surviving. She had learned not to hope, not to dream, because dreams had a way of breaking your heart when they didn't come true. But as she walked through the crowded streets, avoiding the eyes of others, her thoughts were interrupted by a strange feeling, a sense that, just maybe, something was about to change. And that's when he appeared. The man who had been watching her from the other side of the street, as if he had known exactly what she was going through. The man who would soon change her life forever. His name was Samuel West, once a powerful millionaire, now a broken man, struggling to find his place in the world after losing everything. He saw her not just as a homeless girl, but as someone in need of saving, someone who was in a way as lost as he was. His eyes locked onto hers, and in that moment, There was an unspoken understanding between them. He could see the innocence in her. He could see how the world had stripped her of her joy and forced her to grow up too fast. But he also saw something in her that reminded him of a part of himself he thought was gone, a part of him that was still capable of caring, still capable of giving. And for reasons he couldn't yet explain, he knew he had to help her. He approached her cautiously, not wanting to scare her. "Hey," he said gently, his voice low and kind. "Are you okay?" She looked at him, confusion flickering in her eyes. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Not without an agenda, not without a hint of judgment or condescension. She was used to people ignoring her, to people walking by as though she didn't exist. But this man, he saw her, truly saw her. It was as if, for the first time in years, someone cared. "I'm fine," she muttered, not trusting him, not trusting anyone anymore. She wasn't used to kindness, but there was something in his presence that made her hesitate. It was a warmth she hadn't known in so long. He smiled softly as if understanding her skepticism. "No, you're not fine. I can tell. Let me help you," he said, his tone reassuring. Her defenses went up immediately. Who was he to help her? What did he want in return? She had learned long ago that kindness often came with strings attached, that no one gave something for nothing. But something about him made her hesitate. Something about his eyes, the way they weren't filled with pity, but with genuine care, made her lower her guard, if only for a moment. It was then that he made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. He would take her in, offer her a place to stay, a chance at a new life, a family, everything she had never had. She didn't trust him at first, and that was okay. Trust would take time, but what mattered was that he had given her something no one else had, a glimmer of hope. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it. The hope that maybe, just maybe, life didn't have to be this way forever. As they walked together toward his car, the world seemed to quiet around them, as if even the city recognized the significance of what was happening. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so alone. And for him, it was a step toward something he never expected. A chance to heal, to rebuild, and to rediscover the humanity that had been buried beneath his own wounds. For Samuel West, the decision to help the homeless girl was more than just a simple act of charity. It was the first time in years he had truly looked beyond his own problems and saw the suffering of someone else. The weight of his own failures, his business collapsing, and his wealth slipping through his fingers had consumed him. He had been so focused on his loss, drowning in self-pity, that he hadn't realized how much he had disconnected from the world around him. The moment he saw the girl on the street, it was as if a switch was flipped in his mind. There she was, someone who had lost everything, someone who had nothing to her name, living day to day, just trying to survive. It was a harsh contrast to his own life of luxury, where every need had been met, where he could have anything he wanted with a snap of his fingers. But that luxury, that comfort, had come at the cost of his own soul. He had once been a man of ambition, chasing money and power, believing that success was the only thing that mattered. But in losing it all, he had also lost sight of what truly gave life meaning: human connection, empathy, kindness, and generosity. Helping her was the first step toward his own moral awakening, a chance to redeem himself and reestablish a connection to the world. As he spent more time with her, he began to understand how much he had taken for granted, how much he had ignored the struggles of others. She was a mirror to his own inner emptiness, reflecting the flaws in his character and the emptiness of his pursuit of wealth. When he took her into his home, he didn't just offer her shelter. He offered her a chance at hope, a chance to rebuild her life. And in doing so, he began to rebuild his own piece by piece. For the first time in years, he began to experience genuine joy, not from the superficial pleasures of luxury, but from the satisfaction of knowing he was doing something right, something meaningful. He started to see the world in a new light, realizing that success wasn't measured by how much you accumulated, but by how much you could give back. As days passed, Samuel began to notice the little things. The way the girl smiled when she saw food on the table. The way her eyes lit up when she had a warm bed to sleep in. The way she started to trust him, despite her painful past. He saw the innocence that was still alive inside of her, the purity that the world had tried so hard to take away. It stirred something deep inside of him, something he hadn't felt in years. A realization settled within him. He had been so wrapped up in his own failures, in his own misfortunes, that he had forgotten the most important thing in life, the ability to help others, to lift them up when they were down. It was through his relationship with her that Samuel rediscovered his sense of purpose. He realized that there was no greater reward than seeing someone else thrive because of your actions. The girl, once homeless and abandoned, was starting to believe in herself again, to feel safe again, to dream again. And that transformation, that glimpse of hope, made Samuel realize that his life had meaning once more. He became more than just a man recovering from his losses. He became a man of character, a man who understood the true power of kindness. No longer consumed by bitterness or regret, he now saw every day as an opportunity to make a difference. He had no idea where his journey would take him, but he understood that the path to redemption wasn't just about restoring his wealth. It was about restoring his humanity. His moral awakening wasn't instantaneous, but a gradual process. It was a transformation that came not from grand gestures or large acts of generosity, but from the small moments, the quiet realizations. The girl had shown him that there was more to life than chasing material success, that true success was measured by how much you could give, how much you could love, and how much you could help those who needed it most. And in helping her, he was helping himself, becoming a better person, one act of kindness at a time. Samuel began to see the world with new eyes. He started reaching out to others in need, even when it wasn't convenient. He understood that the road to redemption was paved with small, consistent choices. It wasn't about doing something for a reward. It was about doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do. He no longer saw himself as a victim of his circumstances. Instead, he saw himself as a man capable of creating positive change, not just in his own life, but in the lives of others. And as he helped her rebuild her future, he was unknowingly rebuilding his own. The girl, with her quiet resilience and unwavering hope, had awakened a part of him that had long been buried. She had shown him what it meant to be truly alive, not to just exist, but to live with purpose, to live with compassion, and to live for something greater than oneself. Through his moral awakening, Samuel found the strength to forgive himself for the mistakes of his past. He no longer carried the weight of regret. He had found a new way to measure success, not by the size of his bank account, but by the depth of his character and the love he gave to the people around him. The turning point in Samuel West's journey came on an ordinary evening when, for the first time in weeks, he sat down with the homeless girl he had taken in, Maya. It wasn't anything extravagant, but the simplicity of the moment was what made it so profound. They were sitting on the worn-out couch in his living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the night. A soft rain pattered against the windows, and the room was dimly lit, only the glow of a single lamp lighting the space. For the first time, Samuel felt a deep connection to her, a bond that was more than just that of a benefactor and a recipient. It was something raw, something real. He had been trying for weeks to get Maya to open up about her past, about her life before she was homeless, but she always stayed silent, distant, and guarded. The walls she had built around herself were high and strong, too thick for anyone to break through. But tonight, something was different. Maya, who had been silent for so long, began to speak, softly at first, hesitant, but with an honesty that caught Samuel off guard. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her past, of being abandoned by her parents, of running away from a broken foster care system, of being forced to survive on the streets day after day with nothing but her wits and determination. Each word was a glimpse into her soul, a look into the pain she had carried for years. Her story was not just one of survival, but of loss, loneliness, and deep sorrow. Samuel had no idea just how much pain she had been carrying all this time. The weight of her story, the trauma she had experienced, began to hit him with full force. He couldn't help but feel the depth of her hurt, the scars that had been left on her heart by a world that had turned its back on her. As she spoke, he saw the quiet tears in her eyes, and something in him shifted. His heart ached for her, this young girl who had fought so hard just to survive, who had lost everything, yet still managed to hold on to a flicker of hope, however fragile it might have been. He thought of his own failures, his own losses, and realized how much he had taken for granted. Maya, despite everything, still had a strength and resilience that he couldn't fathom. She had endured far more than he could ever imagine, and yet she had not let the cruelty of the world completely break her. There was a moment when their eyes met, and Samuel saw the depth of her pain reflected in her gaze. It was a look that spoke of years of hurt, years of fighting alone. And in that instant, Samuel felt something stir deep within him, a deep sense of responsibility, of protectiveness, of understanding. He realized perhaps for the first time that his role in her life was not just to provide a roof over her head, but to help heal the wounds that ran so much deeper than the surface. He wasn't just giving her food and shelter, he was giving her something more profound, the chance to heal, to be seen, to be understood. Maya wasn't just a homeless girl who needed saving. She was someone with a story, someone with a life that had been shattered by the world's cruelty. And in her vulnerability, she had shown Samuel something he had never truly understood before. The strength it takes to keep going when you have nothing left, the courage it takes to believe in yourself when the world tells you that you don't matter. As he listened to her, a wave of guilt and compassion washed over him. He felt as though he had been blind all this time, blind to the pain others were going through, blind to the struggles that were hidden behind the facades of the world around him. The realization was sharp, painful, but also enlightening. But just as the moment felt like it might break him, Maya wiped her tears and gave him the faintest smile, a smile that was tentative, unsure, but filled with so much hope. It was the first real smile she had shown him since they met. And in that smile, Samuel saw the beginnings of a change. It was as if, for the first time, she was starting to believe that she could be more than just a survivor. She could be someone who could thrive, someone who could rebuild her life, if only she had the right support, the right love. In that moment, Samuel made a vow. He wasn't just going to help her survive. He was going to help her heal. He wasn't going to let her carry the burden of her past alone anymore. He was going to stand by her, no matter what. Because he understood now that the power to change someone's life didn't just come from giving them money or shelter. It came from showing them that they were worth fighting for, worth loving, worth believing in. The emotional weight of that realization hit Samuel like a tidal wave. It was a turning point for both of them. He no longer saw her just as a lost soul in need of rescue. He saw her as someone who could rise again, someone with untapped potential. And that realization sparked something deep within him. He knew that helping Maya wasn't just about fixing her problems. It was about giving her the belief that she was capable of turning her life around, just as he had the power to turn his own life around. In that moment, Samuel's world shifted. He realized that the true power of life wasn't in accumulating wealth or regaining his status. It was in helping others rediscover their worth. It was in moments like these, moments when someone's heart opened up and they trusted you with their pain, that you could truly make a difference. And for Maya, it was the beginning of her journey too. Her story wasn't over, and this moment marked the start of her transformation. From a homeless girl with nothing but despair to a young woman ready to take control of her future. The emotional connection they shared that night was the foundation, of something beautiful, an unlikely partnership forged in the deepest pain, but also in the greatest hope. As the days passed, Samuel West began to notice subtle changes in Maya's behavior. She was quieter than before, often retreating into the corner of the room, her eyes distant, her mind seemingly somewhere far away. While Samuel had been busy trying to rebuild his business and his life, Maya had been quietly working behind the yaw, scenes in ways he hadn't noticed until much later. Her actions were never loud, never demanding attention, but they were powerful in their own way. Samuel had given her a place to stay, food to eat, and security. But Maya was giving him something far more valuable, something that could never be repaid with money. She wasn't asking for anything in return, but she was sacrificing her own comfort for his. Maya had started doing small things around the house that went unnoticed at first. She would clean the kitchen before Samuel had a chance to even step into it, folding the laundry and making sure everything was in its place. Every day she'd take a walk to the nearby market, quietly buying food with the small amount of money she had managed to save from doing odd jobs around the neighborhood. She never asked for help, never asked for a pat on the back or recognition. She simply did what she could with what little she had. In her eyes, it wasn't a big deal, just small gestures of care, of giving what she could. But to Samuel, it was an awakening. He had always been a man who gave generously, who believed in helping others, but he had never realized the value of silent sacrifice, the kind of sacrifice that didn't ask for anything in return, the kind of sacrifice that was purely selfless. One afternoon, Samuel had been working in his office when he heard a faint noise in the hallway. He got up, curious, and walked toward the kitchen. He saw Maya standing in front of the stove, her back to him, stirring something in a pot. The smell of soup filled the air, a simple dish, but comforting. As he stood there in the doorway watching her, he saw something in her that he had missed. Before, something powerful, but quiet, and filled with an almost haunting sadness. Maya was tired. Samuel could see it in the way she moved, the way her shoulders slumped slightly, as if the weight of the world was still pressing down on her. But she never complained. She never showed him her exhaustion or her pain. She simply carried on, because that was what she knew how to do. In her silent, humble way, Maya had become his strength. What Samuel didn't know at the time was that Maya had started to go without meals herself so that there would be enough food for him. She hadn't. Told him that she was cutting back on her own needs, rationing food just so Samuel wouldn't have to worry about anything. He was so focused on his own struggles that he failed to see what Maya was doing, how she had been giving him the best of everything even when she had so little herself. One evening, after returning home from a long day, Samuel noticed something odd. The pantry was almost empty, but there was still a bowl of soup on the kitchen counter, with a small note next to it. "Don't forget to eat." Maya had left it for him, her way of caring for him, even though she herself had eaten nothing. Her sacrifice was small but profound, a quiet act of love and devotion that spoke louder than words ever could. It was in this moment that Samuel realized the depth of Maya's silent sacrifice. He had never asked her to do anything like this. It was her choice, her way of showing him that she cared. But it wasn't just about the food or the small tasks she did around the house. It was about her unwavering belief that if she could make his life just a little easier, a little better, it would all be worth it. Maya had never known true security in her life, but somehow, she had found a way to give it to him. Samuel felt a deep sense of guilt. He had been so focused on fixing his own life that he hadn't noticed the quiet sacrifices Maya had been making for him every single day. In her actions, he saw not just a girl who had been homeless and abandoned by the world, but a woman who was willing to give everything she had, even the little she had left, to help him rebuild his life. This realization hit Samuel hard. He felt overwhelmed with gratitude and a sense of responsibility he hadn't fully understood before. The way Maya had been silently sacrificing herself for him opened his eyes to the depth of her character, to her strength, and to her heart. It made him want to do everything he could to help her, because in truth, she had already done more for him than anyone else ever had. One evening, after coming home from a long day of meetings, Samuel sat down at the dinner table. Maya had left a plate of food for him again, and this time he didn't hesitate. He took a bite and felt the warmth of the food fill him. But more than the food, it was the love and care behind the gesture that filled him. He knew now that he couldn't continue to live his life the way he had before. He couldn't ignore the quiet sacrifice that Maya had been making. He couldn't take her for granted anymore. He walked into the kitchen, where Maya was sitting, quietly reading a book. He stopped in front of her, his heart heavy with emotion. "Maya," he said softly. She looked up at him, and for the first time he could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of the burden she had been carrying for so long. "Thank you," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "Thank you for everything you've done. You've given me so much, more than I deserve." Maya's eyes softened, and she gave him a faint smile. "I didn't do it for thanks," she whispered. "I just wanted to help." And in that moment, Samuel realized that Maya had given him something far more valuable than money or possessions. She had given him her heart. Her silent sacrifice, her quiet devotion to him, was the beginning of a transformation. It wasn't just about giving her food or a place to stay anymore. It was about giving her the life she deserved, a life full of opportunity, love, and respect. He had taken her in when she had nothing, but now he saw the depths of her spirit, her strength, and her willingness to sacrifice everything to help him. Samuel knew from that moment on, he would never take Maya for granted again. She wasn't just a girl in need. She was someone who had already given him everything. And he would spend the rest of his life making sure that she never had to make a sacrifice like that again. As the weeks went by, the transformation in Samuel was undeniable. He was becoming more determined, more focused. The weight of Maya's quiet sacrifice hung heavily on his heart, pushing him to do more, to be more, not just for himself, but for her. Samuel had seen what true strength looked like in Maya, and now it was his turn to show the same resilience, but he wasn't doing it for business or personal success anymore. He was doing it for her, for the girl who had been silently carrying the weight of both their worlds. Maya, despite everything, had always been calm and composed, never revealing her worries or fears. But there were moments when her vulnerability broke through. As the days passed, Samuel noticed she was becoming more anxious. She would sit by the window, staring out at the street for hours, her thoughts miles away. Sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, Samuel saw her hands tremble as she folded the laundry, or tried to hide her tears behind a book. There was something she wasn't telling him, something deep within her that she was afraid of confronting. But Samuel knew, he could feel it in his bones, that whatever it was, he couldn't let it crush her. One cold, rainy afternoon, Samuel came home after a stressful day of meetings. He was exhausted, but as soon as he stepped into the house, he knew something was off. The warmth that usually filled the room was absent. Maya was nowhere to be seen, and for the first time in a while, the silence felt oppressive. He called her name, his voice echoing through the empty house. There was no answer. His heart skipped a beat. He knew she hadn't gone out. She never did without telling him. Panic started to creep into his mind as he searched the house, finally finding her in the corner of the living room, sitting on the floor, hugging her knees to her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and there was a look of sheer terror in her eyes. "Maya!" Samuel rushed to her, kneeling down in front of her, his hands trembling as he gently took her shoulders. "What's wrong? What happened?" For a moment, Maya didn't speak. She just looked at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly as if she couldn't catch her breath. Samuel could feel the weight of the fear and confusion that seemed to have gripped her entire being. Finally, she whispered, "I'm not strong enough. I'm not brave enough to face what's coming." Samuel's heart shattered at her words. Maya, the girl who had been through more hardship than anyone he knew, the girl who had silently supported him through his darkest days, was now broken. Whatever it was that had been haunting her was far worse than he had ever imagined. But Samuel's protective instincts kicked in. He wouldn't allow her to fall apart. He wouldn't let whatever was scaring her destroy the bright, hopeful spirit he had come to rely on. "No," Samuel said firmly, lifting her chin so that she had to look him in the eye. "You're stronger than you know. You've been through so much already, Maya. You can't let fear take you down now." He spoke with a fierce determination, one that he hadn't felt in a long time. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. I won't let anything happen to you. You're not alone anymore." Maya's eyes welled up with tears as she gazed into Samuel's face, the raw honesty in his voice breaking through the walls she had built around her heart. She shook her head, still hesitant, still uncertain, but Samuel wouldn't let her retreat back into herself. "I'm not going anywhere, Maya," he continued, his voice steady. "I'm not going to leave you to fight this alone. We're in this together now, no matter what comes next." That night, Samuel sat with her by the window, watching the rain pour down outside. His mind was racing, his determination growing stronger with every passing second. He would do whatever it took to protect her. No matter how many obstacles stood in their way, no matter how hard the world tried to break them, he would never let anything hurt her again. Maya had already sacrificed so much for him. Now, it was his turn to be the one who protected her. He began researching everything he could about the threats that had been lurking in the shadows of Maya's past, the ones she had been too afraid to share with him. Each new piece of information made him more resolute. Samuel was no longer just a man trying to rebuild his business. He was a man on a mission, an urgent, unwavering mission to protect the girl who had saved him when he thought he was beyond saving. Days turned into weeks, and with each passing day, Samuel's protective nature grew stronger. He started taking extra precautions, setting up alarms, changing the locks, securing the house. And yet, his actions never seemed overbearing to Maya. She noticed, of course, but she could feel the love behind every decision, every move he made to ensure her safety. He wasn't trying to control her, he was trying to keep her safe. He wasn't just a man of wealth and power anymore. He had become a man of conviction. Then, one night, as Samuel was leaving his office after a long day of work, he received a call. It was Maya, her voice trembling as she whispered, "I think they've found me." His heart dropped into his stomach. The fear he had been trying to protect her from had finally caught up with them. "I'm coming for you," Samuel said immediately, his voice a quiet storm of anger and determination. "I won't let them take you. You're safe with me, Maya. No one's going to hurt you, I swear." The drive back to the house was a blur, but Samuel's focus was razor sharp. His mind was locked onto one thought: protect Maya at any cost. When he arrived, he found her standing in the doorway, visibly shaken but still standing strong. And there, in her eyes, was the same strength he had seen in her all along, the silent determination to fight for herself, for the life she had built, and for the future she was beginning to dream of. Samuel stepped forward, standing next to her. "We'll face this together," he said, his voice firm but full of love. "Whatever comes, we'll face it side by side. No one can break us apart. Not now, not ever." And in that moment, Maya realized something. She had never been as alone as she thought. Samuel had never been just her savior. He had become her partner, her protector. She didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone anymore. Samuel would stand by her every step of the way, no matter the cost. Samuel sat alone in the dimly lit office, the flickering light of the desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. His mind was a battlefield of regret. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions, decisions, and realizations. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had failed Maya, failed to see the extent of her struggles, failed to truly understand the depth of her sacrifice. He closed his eyes, remembering the first time he had met her. She was just a homeless girl with nothing but the clothes on her back and a glimmer of hope in her eyes. He had helped her out of kindness, not expecting anything in return. But as he had gotten to know her, Samuel had seen her quiet resilience, the way she held herself together despite the world constantly breaking her down. He had admired her strength, but at the same time, he had never truly understood what it meant to have nothing, to be invisible, to be completely alone. It wasn't until that night when Maya had broken down in his arms that everything had come crashing down on him. He had been so focused on his own problems, on trying to rebuild his life after his bankruptcy, that he had missed the signs. Maya had been carrying her pain alone, silently suffering for far too long, and he had never noticed. He had failed her. A deep, gnawing pain filled his chest as he thought about how he had let her shoulder so much of the emotional burden. He had been so wrapped up in his own redemption arc, so focused on clawing his way back to success, that he had failed to notice the signs that Maya needed him just as much. She had been quietly sacrificing her own happiness, pushing her own needs to the back burner to help him, and he had been too blind to see it. How could he have been so selfish? The realization hit him like a slap to the face. Samuel had been chasing after success, wealth, and recognition, trying to make up for his past mistakes. But in doing so, he had lost sight of the most important thing in his life, Maya. She wasn't just a young girl who had helped him rebuild his life. She was a person with dreams, with fears, with a heart that was just as fragile as his own. She deserved better than this. Better than him. Better than the life he had given her. Tears welled up in his eyes as he thought about the time he had wasted, focusing on the wrong things. His ambition had led him down a path of self-centeredness, and in doing so, he had hurt the one person who had truly cared for him. Maya had given him everything, her time, her love, her heart, and he had taken it all for granted. How could he ever make it right? He stood up from his desk, pacing back and forth, his mind racing with ways to fix the damage he had caused. He had to do something, anything, to show Maya that he was worthy of her trust, her love, her sacrifice. But what could he do? How could he possibly redeem himself after everything? The answer was simple but painful. He needed to put Maya first, not just in words, but in actions. He needed to show her that he understood her sacrifices, her pain, and her worth. He needed to stop chasing after the superficial things, money, status, success, and focus on what truly mattered, their relationship. He needed to be there for her in ways that were meaningful and real. With a newfound sense of clarity, Samuel made up his mind. He wasn't going to let this opportunity slip away. He wasn't going to let Maya slip away. If he had to start over, from scratch, so be it. He would make things right, one step at a time. The next day, Samuel drove to the small cafe where Maya liked to spend her afternoons. He had told her he needed to meet her there to discuss something important, but what he had planned to say weighed heavily on his heart. As he walked inside, his eyes scanned the room until he spotted her sitting in the corner, her head down as she scribbled in a notebook. She looked peaceful, but Samuel could see the exhaustion behind her eyes, the quiet sadness that never seemed to leave her. He walked up to her, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the way she smiled when she noticed him. But this time, there was something different about it, a forced, distant smile that sent a chill down his spine. Maya was trying to be strong, trying to hide her feelings, but Samuel knew better. He knew her too well. "Maya," he said softly, his voice trembling. "I owe you an apology, a big one." Maya's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. She simply nodded, as if expecting him to continue. "I've been so focused on my own mistakes and my own redemption that I failed to see what you've been going through. I've taken everything from you, your time, your love, your energy, and I've never once stopped to consider what it's cost you. I've been selfish, and I'm sorry." He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "You didn't deserve any of that," You deserve so much more. I should have been there for you in the way that you were always there for me." Tears welled up in his eyes as he reached for her hand, gently squeezing it. "I don't know how I can make it up to you, Maya, but I will spend the rest of my life trying. You are the most important person in my world, and I can't lose you. Please, let me prove to you that I can be the person you deserve." Maya was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on their joined hands. Then, slowly, she looked up at Sao, her eyes softening. "Samuel," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've never asked you for anything. I never wanted you to fix everything for me. I just wanted you to see me for who I really am." Samuel swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. "I see you, Maya, I do. And I'm so sorry for not seeing you sooner." In that moment, something shifted between them. The walls that had been built around their hearts began to crumble. Samuel realized that redemption wasn't about fixing the past. It was about being there for the present and building a future together. Maya wasn't some damsel in distress he needed to save. She was his equal, his partner, and he needed to start acting like it. From that day forward, Samuel made it his mission to not just make up for his past mistakes, but to truly become the man Maya deserved. He wasn't just working to rebuild his fortune anymore. He was working to rebuild their relationship, one based on love, trust, and mutual respect. And for the first time in his life, he truly felt like he was on the right path. The weight of the decision was unbearable. Samuel stood at the edge of the large conference room, his palms sweaty, his mind racing with a single question. Had he done enough? Just days earlier, he had promised Maya that he would fight for their future, that he would fight for everything she had sacrificed for him. But now, standing in front of the board of directors of his company, the very same company that had once cast him aside in his moment of need, Samuel had to put everything on the line. It wasn't just his future at stake anymore, it was hers too. The room was quiet, too quiet. The tension was thick, suffocating, as the cold, calculating faces of the board members glared at him, waiting for him to make his case. Samuel had always been good at making deals, at securing success with charm and manipulation. But this was different. This was the fight of his life, and it wasn't about business. It was about honor, redemption, and a promise he had made to Maya. A few months ago, Samuel would have been overwhelmed by the pressure. He would have crumbled, given in to the expectations of the powerful people around him. But now, everything had changed. The girl who had once sat on the cold streets with nothing but a backpack and a dream had transformed his life in ways he couldn't even fully comprehend. Maya wasn't just some homeless girl anymore. She had become his muse, his strength, and his reason to fight when everything else seemed lost. The CEO of the company, a man named Gregory Hawk, looked at Samuel with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "You're wasting our time, Samuel," Gregory said, leaning back in his chair. "You're broke, your reputation is shattered, and you're here asking us to take a risk on an unproven venture. Why should we trust you? What makes you think you deserve another shot?" The room was silent, and Samuel felt the weight of the judgment settle in his chest. Every person in that room had the power to decide his fate, and they didn't believe in him. They didn't believe in the man he had become, or in the man he was trying to become. They only saw his past mistakes, his failures. They saw the bankrupt millionaire, the man who had lost everything. They didn't see the truth, that he had already begun rebuilding, that he had found purpose, not in wealth, but in love. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he doing the right thing? Was this venture, this decision, going to help Maya, or was he just clinging to an illusion of hope? Samuel glanced at the photo in his wallet, a picture of Maya, taken the day she had agreed to give him a second chance. Her eyes were bright with the promise of a future neither of them had ever imagined. She believed in him, but did he believe in himself? As the seconds dragged on, Samuel's mind flashed back to that fateful night when he had held Maya as she cried, when she had revealed how much she had given up to help him get back on his feet. She had risked everything, and all he had done was push her away with his own insecurities, his obsession with success. But now he understood. He wasn't just doing this for his own redemption. He was doing it for her. For the girl who had believed in him when no one else had. A sudden surge of inspiration coursed through him. The doubt faded, and a fire lit within him. It wasn't just about the money. It wasn't about impressing the board or proving Gregory Hawk wrong. It was about something bigger. It was about showing Maya that he was capable of being the man she needed. It was about honoring the promise he had made to her, the promise to fight for their future, no matter what. Samuel looked up, meeting Gregory's eyes with a newfound resolve. "I'm not asking for your trust," he said, his voice steady, unwavering. "I'm not asking for your approval. I'm telling you this. If you don't believe in me, you'll be missing out on the greatest opportunity of your lives. You want success? I've got a vision that can make this company soar. But it's not going to happen with people who are afraid to take risks. It's going to happen with people who believe in second chances. People who know what it's like to lose everything and have the courage to rise again." Gregory's expression faltered, and for the first time, Samuel saw a hint of uncertainty in his eyes. The other board members exchanged glances, murmuring amongst themselves. But Samuel wasn't done. "I'm standing here not because I want something from you," he continued. "I'm standing here because I want to give you something. I've learned what really matters. I've learned that success isn't about the money or the fame. It's about loyalty. It's about believing in something bigger than yourself. And what I'm offering you isn't just a chance to make money. I'm offering you a chance to be part of something real. Something that matters." The room grew quiet again, the air heavy with anticipation. Samuel's heart raced, his breath shallow. He had done everything he could. Now it was up to them. Then, without warning, a voice interrupted the silence. Maya. She had entered the room unnoticed, standing at the door with a calm expression that seemed out of place in the tension-filled room. "I believe in him," she said, her voice carrying across the room with such certainty that it made everyone stop in their tracks. All eyes turned to her, and for the first time, there was a shift in the room. Maya wasn't just Samuel's support anymore. She was standing up for him, for both of them, in a way that spoke volumes. She wasn't just the homeless girl who had helped him. She was the catalyst for his transformation. "I've seen him fight," she continued, her voice unwavering. "I've seen him struggle and fall and get back up again. Samuel doesn't give up, and I don't think you'll find anyone else who will fight as hard for this company as he will. If you're looking for someone who's only here for the glory, then you're looking at the wrong guy. But if you want someone who will dedicate everything to making this company the best it can be, then Samuel is the one." The board members looked at each other, clearly shaken by Maya's words. Samuel had always believed in himself, but hearing Maya speak with such passion, such conviction, made everything feel real. She had always been the person to remind him that he wasn't alone. And now, in the most important moment of his life, she was there with him, believing in him when the whole world doubted. It wasn't just Samuel who had the power to change things. Together, they had the power to turn everything around. The suspense in the room hung thick, and for a moment, Samuel thought they would turn him down. But then, Gregory Hawk stood up slowly, clapping his hands together. "All right," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "Let's give this a shot. You've got my attention. You better not make us regret it." The room exploded into murmurs, and Samuel let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. Maya walked over to him, her eyes shining with pride and hope. He had done it, and it wasn't just him. It was them. Together, they had turned the impossible into something possible. The months that followed were a blur of hard work, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But Samuel and Maya had a shared mission, a single vision that kept them moving forward, to rebuild the broken pieces of a shattered empire. Samuel had always been a man who chased success, but now he had a new purpose: to prove that success could be meaningful. It wasn't just about building wealth. It was about building something that mattered. Every obstacle that came their way only strengthened their resolve. The board members, initially skeptical of their unconventional partnership, began to see the passion that fueled their work. Samuel's drive was unmatched, but it was Maya who brought balance to their endeavors. Her perspective, grounded in humility and authenticity, transformed their approach. She reminded Samuel that the greatest leaders were the ones who empowered others, who saw the potential in those around them, and who gave back to the community that had once been overlooked. The company began to thrive again, but this time it wasn't just a story of financial success. It was a story of redemption, of two people who had once been overlooked by society, one a homeless girl, the other a bankrupt millionaire, coming together to rewrite their own narratives. They had fought their way through adversity, and now they stood on the precipice of something bigger than either of them could have imagined. But it wasn't just the business that was growing. The relationship between Samuel and Maya had also evolved. What started as a partnership rooted in mutual respect had blossomed into something deeper, a connection built on shared values, trust, and a sense of belonging. They were no longer just allies in business. They were a team in life. Samuel had never imagined that he would find a sense of purpose and peace with someone so different from him. Maya, in turn, had found someone who didn't look at her as a charity case, but as a partner, an equal who had the strength to stand beside him, not behind him. One evening, as they stood in the new office overlooking the city, the skyline gleaming, under the fading light of the sun, Maya turned to Samuel. Her eyes sparkled with a quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the lost girl she had been not so long ago. "I never imagined this," she said softly, a smile tugging at her lips. "Not in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be standing here, looking at all of this, with you." Samuel looked at her, the weight of his journey reflected in his eyes. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I never imagined I'd be standing here either," he admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But what we've built together, what we've become, it's more than I ever thought was possible." They stood there in silence for a moment, the hum of the city below them like a distant heartbeat. The world around them had changed, but they had changed too. They weren't the same people they had been before. Samuel no longer saw himself as the millionaire trying to reclaim his wealth. He saw himself as a man who had learned what truly mattered: connection, integrity, and love. And Maya was no longer the homeless girl with nothing but hope. She had become the woman who had shown him what it meant to truly fight for something, not just for survival, but for a better future. As they looked out over the city, Samuel couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. There had been moments of doubt, moments when it felt like the weight of the world was too much to bear. But they had persevered. Together, they had made it through the hardest of times and emerged stronger, wiser and more determined than ever. They had found their purpose, not in wealth, but in each other and in the impact they could have on the world around them. "Maya," Samuel said, his voice steady, "we've been through so much, and we're not done yet. But one thing I know for sure is this: we're building something that's going to last, something that matters, something that will change lives." Maya squeezed his hand, her eyes meeting his with the same unwavering confidence she had shown from the very beginning. "I believe in you," she said softly. "I believe in us. And I believe that together we can do anything." It was in that moment that Samuel realized that this shared vision, this bond, this purpose, was what truly made them successful. They had done the impossible, not by focusing on themselves, but by focusing on each other, on the people they wanted to help, on the future they wanted to create. They had turned their pain into purpose, their struggle into strength. The world had watched them, skeptics and critics alike, but in the end, it was their belief in each other, in their vision, that had carried them through. Their story wasn't just one of business success. It was a story of hope, of redemption, of proving that even the most broken can be rebuilt. They had given the world a new definition of what it meant to succeed. As the city lights twinkled below them, Samuel and Maya knew that this was just the beginning. They had a lifetime ahead of them, a lifetime to continue building, growing, and giving back. They were no longer just a millionaire and a homeless girl. They were partners, leaders, and most importantly, they were family. And in that moment, with the promise of the future before them, they knew one thing for sure. The world was theirs to change. Together, they could accomplish anything. With clarity, with hope, and with unwavering determination, they faced the future. Not as two individuals, but as one. And nothing could stop them now.